Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Research Notes series. Today, I have Dr. Gustav Mveha. This is probably the last time that I'll call Gustav Doctor. Special
Yeah.
request. So, Gustav holds a PhD and a master's in linguistics from the University of Cape Town. And our discussion today will be about why he left academia. Gustav, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, Primrose. Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's a bit cold
Oh,
here, but nonetheless, we're all covered up for it.
I can see. Mustard. It's the new black.
Yes, definitely, with the color as well. Just fighting it
Yeah,
all and feeling very free and bright.
yeah. See, people are into nudes and mustard and natural colors these days, which is it's nice to see. Yeah.
Lovely. I think your beanie compliments that as well.
Thank you. Oh, yes, yes, yes. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So, just for context to the viewers, Gustav and I met when we were in the PhD trenches at the University of Cape Town. We were tutoring, went on to lecture, and we also served as curriculum advisors. So, it's very
Yeah.
interesting that we're here today speaking about something that's not curriculum advice, but I think in the end might touch on that as well.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, for context, our first question to every guest is tell us about your academic journey and how you got to where you are today.
So my academic journey started, I would say after I started working. After undergrad, I taught history and English in high school. Yeah, and I fell in love with teaching. I just loved it. And yeah, I got wind of the fact that, hey, you can teach in university, you can teach all the students and da da da. And I was like, after remembering the great times I had with my professors in high school, in varsity, I was
Mm.
like, let me do a master's and a PhD. And so I went into academia with a mindset of, I'm going to be such a great teacher. I'm going to love it so much. Yeah, and that's how I got into it. Did linguistics, really enjoyed, studying languages. And after that, I think around the time we met, we were both lecturing. I think you were in politics, I was in linguistics, and
Yeah,
I'd be like, "Yeah, I just had a class of tuttlings, and I taught them this concept of like linguistics, and it worked out really well." And yeah, I really enjoyed it because of teaching. That's why I got into academia in the first place, and I think that's why I stuck around for the most part doing my PhD. Did quite a bit of teaching. Yeah,
amazing. So I see you had a passion for teaching and you really wanted to be teaching within the university space.
yeah, yeah.
So can you share with us factors which led to you deciding to leave academia? Because I'm thinking once you leave, you can't be lecturing at a university.
Yeah, that's right. I think once you leave, you really can't be lecturing at the university. So for me, it sort of came down to the fact that I would say I was a bit disillusioned in terms of that when I was doing I don't know if I'm using disillusioned right, but I don't know. Anyway, um, when I started working in academia, I mean, as a researcher, as a master's and PhD, in my mind, I always thought that when I was done, I would go on and become a teacher because I believe that I was much stronger at teaching than I was at like writing. I mean, I'm an above average writer. I'm an above average researcher, not the best out there. I do my work, I get to writing and so on. So I really forward towards that. And yeah, 2023, I finished my PhD in 2022, and 2023 I got a postdoc at the University of the Free State.
Mm.
Amazing. Still have a lot of friends back there. It was a really great place. But I think at that time I started realizing more and more that academia places a lot of value on research and on writing than it does on teaching. So, for instance, your promotions in academia from being a junior lecturer to a senior lecturer, a professor, all of that is much more dependent on the research and writing bit than it is on the teaching. To which I was like, man, I enjoy research, but I don't know if I would rather do research than teach. And I mean, to be fair, I saw a lot of professors who, the higher up they went, the less teaching they seemed to do. And in fact, the teaching more so got given to postgrad students like
Mm,
myself, who got the experience to be able to do that, which I thought was great. Um, that was the one straw. I was like, okay, it seems you have to do more research than you have to do the teaching. And shortly before, I mean, immediately after I graduated, I got married. And so that was my first postdoc position. And then I started searching. I'm like, okay, I need to get another postdoc. And then it dawned on me that, hey, you're not going to get a postdoc for 7 years in one place.
nope.
You're going to have to hop around from country to country,
Mm,
country. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I want to
mhm,
stay in one city, start a family, and then just plant roots. I wasn't for the idea of moving to Europe for 2 years, moving to America for another year,
mm,
then maybe Australia. I didn't need that because I felt like I'd moved around quite a lot. So that was the second part. And then the third part, I think beyond that was just I had a chat with a few postdocs, and the chat was around how postdocs do a lot of work.
mm.
And I'm trying to say that work is not a problem for me. I'm happy to work if I have life insurance, if I have health cover,
Definitely.
if I have medical aid, if I have retirement savings. But I was
Mm,
having chats with people that had done their postdocs and PhDs at much prestigious institutions than I had been exposed to, and a lot of these people have had to go into industry. For instance, people that did degrees in physics, statistics have had to go into places of industry to start over. But now the problem was that I had a humanities PhD in linguistics, which you really couldn't do much with it outside the university space. You're in politics. UN could easily snap you up. For me, it's not as easy.
mm,
So it's linguistics, very, very limited PhD. So to which I started thinking to myself, have to move around even after 7 years of postdoc, no guarantee for work. And I remember I applied to a postdoctoral fellowship, which only had like 15 places open, and there were like 1,500 applicants. I was like, my
Ah,
goodness, the odds are stacked against me. I can't do this.
exactly.
And I hate the researching bit. I mean, I don't hate research. I just hate the fact that research is the thing that gets you ahead. So then I went into a little bit of a depressive spell for like a year. I was
Mm,
really depressed when all of these things started dawning on me. And I was like, you know what? Um, I think it's time for me to leave academia. I don't want to be an adjunct professor and not have savings for my children, not have anything for my wife. And God forbid that I pass away before it's my time.
oh,
And yeah, I started thinking much seriously about that, and job security was one of the things as well. And so I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I think maybe it's time for me to start rethinking about my life and making other decisions. And that's when I decided very painfully after a year of like contemplating and just, it was so bad, Primrose. I was on antidepressants for a while.
no.
And yeah, and I stopped. I was just like, you know what? I can't do this. Academia is not for me. I got in for the teaching, but I don't do that because all I'm doing is sitting in an office, reading other people's papers to write papers. I was just like, it wasn't, the math wasn't mathing. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh my, thank you so much for that response. And I hope I didn't uncap a wound, because I wasn't aware of the extent to which
Nah, nah,
reconsidering.
now I've been in therapy, so I am still, so it's helping me th navigate through a lot of that.
Amazing. That's a good one as
Yeah.
well. So, what
Yeah.
I'm gathering from your response now is, academia, I'm telling this to people as well. It's not as easy to get into, particularly because there's very few positions and many more PhDs nowadays.
Yeah.
And much like you, I love teaching, and I think teaching is actually second nature to me. I don't
Yeah.
mind doing research, but I don't like the
Yeah.
pressure of churn out so many papers in such a little
Yeah.
time. There's actually no time to balance out looking for new insights from research, from fieldwork, and then trying to
Yeah.
write, which is why
Yeah.
these people that make it to professor level end up, getting teaching buyout funds so that they can focus more on research. So I think with
Yeah.
you, you could already see that that's not what you want.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my second postdoc,
Yeah.
moved from UCT to Stellenbosch. And last year, I think I told you about this. I went to Germany. I wanted to gain insights from other postdocs, only to meet people that had done a postdoc in Germany, a postdoc in Amsterdam, and now a postdoc like in France or somewhere. And I was like, if they are doing this when they are European, what
Yeah.
more about me?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really dark space for some of us. I do know that some
Yeah.
people make it a bit easier. So you
Yeah.
did mention that you didn't want to do adjunct lecturing. For context, for some of our viewers and listeners, when you're an adjunct, you're basically temporary. You have one leg into academia, and of course, you're not like fully salaried. All those benefits you mentioned that don't come with it. So I think as people that are post our 30s or late 20s, those are major
Yeah.
considerations to make.
That's true.
And I don't think people should wait around for too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are brave. I'm still thinking, how I will pivot, political
Yeah.
analysis, definitely throwing those CVs at the UN. So hopefully,
Yeah.
those options will also pan out for me.
Yeah. I hope so too. I hope so. I mean, I remember I had a few students that I mentored, and
Mm.
I chat with them. They'd say, "Hey, what are you up to now?" I'd be like, honestly, I don't think I'll see the inside of a lecture room as a professor again. If
Mm.
anything, I'll probably see it as a student. But if you have to pivot, and like this is the thing that you're saying that yes, you went to Europe, came back, and still you pursued postdoc. And I'd like to say that I'm not saying that, hey, everybody should quit academia. By all means, I'm just saying that, look, if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But there
Mm.
are people out there who are happy to travel the world and do a postdoc here, do a postdoc there. I've met people like that. And by all means, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. But I would say if you're doing that, then at least know that, hey, on the other side, what's waiting for you. Because I grew up in a community of like police officers, teachers,
Mm.
doctors. No one was a professor, right? So no one was saying that, yeah, to become a professor, you need to write academic journals and academic papers.
Exactly.
Do that because that was just never my background.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. So I'm going to ask you a question which was not in the briefing, but you're good at this. What do you think about this emphasis on research? Because universities thrive on research outputs. For example, UCT is a number one in terms of being research intensive. But the
yeah,
quality of teaching, I feel like students have lost out on
yeah,
having a professor who is
yeah.
like you.
Yeah, so I think teaching is actually very important because it is from teaching where you get to encourage or at least find your next big professors in the, no, I mean, not to say I'm a big professor or anything, but that's where you get to mold the young minds to
Mm.
get interested in whatever part of research needs to be done. Yes, research is important, but in the same way that we cannot overemphasize teaching over research, we can't emphasize research over teaching because our teaching material comes from the research, but our research material also has to inform the world that we live in. You're familiar with this. We've taught many undergrads for whom, you know, they've gone on and they've just read the introduction of a research paper and
Mm.
they've used it as to write whatever chapter and whatever essay they've written. And
Mm.
to a degree, um, an overemphasis on research results in people sort of, I would say, almost sending out like half-baked papers. I'm not saying that
Mm,
people are sending half-baked papers, but the pressure that you put on one to be able to produce a quality paper versus to be able to produce like quality work. Um, yeah, it's a bit unfair, to be frank, because even if you look at a lot of funding calls for research
mm,
proposals, um, they're two extremes, right? Like you need to bring a research topic that's really good. Now, the problem is if you go and take a topic that is very broad and they're not going to fund it. If you
mm,
go and take a topic that is very niche and very state of the art, they're not going to fund it,
mhm,
right? So you almost have to find a good level of like mediocrity and like just like an interesting level of an interesting just to stay relevant.
mm,
And it's sad, but I honestly think that I guess, oh yes, and I wanted to say that the overemphasis on like research over teaching is what has seen an uprise in terms of adjunct professors, where you see
mm.
universities are less inclined to give out money to hire long-term staff because the staff they have are there on research grants
Yes.
and they're being paid by whatever other outside institution. So who gets to do the teaching? The PhDs get to do the teachings. The master's students get to do the teaching.
Mm.
And year in, year out, you have like I would say a high degree of people coming in to the institution and leaving, and you have all these postdocs and adjuncts coming in, which is it's a system that's it's not fair. It's not all right. I think at least, in my humble opinion.
I also agree. And I think for me, unfortunately, it took getting to postdoc to realize that this academic freedom that I thought I was looking for, which I couldn't
Yeah,
find when I was working in a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, actually doesn't exist. And your
yeah,
example brings that out exactly in terms of you can't do a very broad research project. You also can't go
yeah,
very niche. So
yeah.
even the rejections of applications for research grants and research proposals, I feel like the rejection rate is actually higher.
Yeah,
So another thing is I actually did realize that the academic freedom I was looking for in terms of research, I
yeah,
don't think it exists. Yeah,
yeah,
to a large extent.
yeah. To a large extent, I don't know if it exists either because you're saying that rejections are higher. I mean, I have a I have a folder in my laptop of all applications I had made for jobs, postdocs. I promise you, Primrose, I have like I think about 30 rejection letters
Sure.
from the time I was in my master's up until the time I got my postdoc at UFS.
Mm,
I had like 30 rejections of like jobs I was applying for and applying for and applying for. Some of them I never even got a rejection, just
no response at all.
no response.
Mm,
Not even getting called back for an interview. And that's the harsh nature of the academic space. And I think that when a lot of people are thinking of getting a PhD, it's important to think beyond the day that you wear the red gown. I mean, I remember when I was sharing with you earlier that when I wore my red gown and I was happy
mm,
and proud, there was a part of me that was sad because I was like, yo, where am I going to get a job now? Because I've graduated.
mm,
It's not to say one degree is better than the other, but like it's not a mathematics degree that I could take into I don't know, data science. It's not a physics degree that I could take into another field. It was a linguistics degree.
exactly.
I had to
Mm.
study languages, right? And that happens in the language space, at least. Yeah,
And
well, in the
those are
universities,
usually in universities. Yeah.
yeah, in the linguistics department.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So tell me, how has life evolved after making this decision and actually exiting academia?
so after exiting, a good friend of mine. Well, she's not really a good friend, but she was someone that I looked up to. I think in
Mm,
terms of PhD, when I got into the PhD program, I looked up to her and her and a few others. There was like a cohort of PhD students at the time when I started my master's, or at least ending my master's and starting my PhD. They were wrapping up their studies. They were like this group of like the cream of the crop, the geniuses,
Wow.
at least from my perspective. So I had a chat with some of them, and I'm like, hey, what did you do after your PhD? Because I've just finished my PhD and I don't know what to do.
Mm,
And I think all of them, I think there was a group of five.
yeah.
Four of them had left academia, and
Oh,
only one was working as a lecturer, but not in linguistics, in another field where she
okay.
had to sort of re she had to change her field of study to get into another completely different degree. I mean, program.
Yeah.
Someone else was working in corporate. Um, Two of them had to go back to school and do undergrad degrees again.
Yes.
This is after 7 years of postdoc, Primrose.
No ways. After 7 years of postdoc.
After 7 years of postdoc,
That's
they
long.
had to, because I was done with my PhD. I started in 2018, and they were
Mm,
going into their postdocs. I started my PhD. So by the time I was finished in 2022, some of them had done 5 years. I think 5 years, five
mm.
to 7 years of postdoc. They still weren't able to find work, and they knew, and I'm sure they'd had conversations with other people in similar shoes
Mm.
and who were also unable to find work. And so, yeah, people will often find that they'd have to go back to scratch and start all over again with an undergrad at the age of 40.
Hectic. Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
Yeah. And you chose to also go back to school.
I chose to go back to school. So, I would say I've had an interest in tech one
Hmm.
way or another. I have a few friends that pursued degrees in tech, and so I had a chat with them. I was like, look, man, I'd like to do a different degree. I'd like to get into tech. What are the options? And the options were do a boot camp, get into tech, or do a BSc. And for me, I thought of doing boot camps, but every time I looked at job adverts, they were like, uh, would like you if you have a BSc in data science or a BSc in
Mm,
information science. So I was like, you know what? I might as well just go back to do a BSc. And in my mind, the way it worked was like this: do 7 years of postdoc and possibly not get a job, or do 3 years of an undergrad degree and then get a job in a whole different career
feel.
field. I was like, you know
Mm.
what? I'm gonna go do a BSc in data science, applied to a German university, doing it online, and yeah, started doing a degree. I think I'm in my first year. I'm about to finish my first year of studies now. Had to do calculus, which is mathematics, having to do statistics,
Mm.
all parts of the brain that I haven't worked on in a while. But
Mm.
I would say I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm doing this, and at least every now and again, I do research and find, oh, where are the jobs? Where can people work? What's
Exactly.
happening? And
Mm.
it really it works out. It really helps. Yeah, so I'm happier in that regard.
Nice.
And
Congratulations.
yeah, and I mean, I started a job next week working in insurance. So
Wow. A whole doctor in linguistics. Nice one. Interesting.
yeah, so that's why I'm like, yeah, I don't even think I want
I
to
feel
be
like the
called a
return on this
doctor.
investment is coming already.
Yeah, the ROIs, eh? So I'm just like, I mean, I wouldn't say I regret having studied
Mm.
a PhD. I definitely don't regret that. Had amazing supervisors, I was part of a great department,
Yeah.
but unfortunately the problems of academia were bigger than my department, because when I shared this with you, you were like, "What? Me too." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So my supervisor was never the problem. So I would say through my PhD journey, I learned how to read, I guess, write, and
Mm.
do research at a very high degree. And I would say that it's been one of the things that have helped me get through my mathematics and statistics, because I hadn't done maths and stats since I was like in high school. That was over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I hadn't done any of that stuff. So I was like, okay, I know how to teach, so let me teach myself. I know how to learn, let me learn. And I guess being a PhD whenever if I need to there's this to fill in forms, I can then be Dr. So and so.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
interesting. So I was going to ask you a question about what advice you would give, let's say, to younger people. But I feel like things change so fast
yeah,
generationally. You mentioned we
yeah,
came from seeing a lot of my mom was a nurse, had a
yeah,
lot of aunts who were teachers. We had police officers also, and like people who were in the military. Those were the
yeah.
jobs for them.
Those are the jobs, yeah.
So when they saw me wanting to get into academia, for them, I was like, that's amazing because they had seen people that had
Yeah,
made it in that sector. But
yeah.
now I'm like, well, if only they had known.
Only.
So I've also thought about doing an undergraduate, possibly in law or economics, because I
Yeah,
see how they feed into like future career prospects that even
yeah.
when I position myself later in life, it's going to help. So I also have an undergrad on the cards, just trying to
Oh,
see where the funds can come from. So it's
yeah.
definitely not a new thing. What do you think younger people should do, even though they are zealous about becoming academics before
I
they
would say,
pass?
um, I would say one, I'm not discouraging anyone from doing a PhD. I feel like this is a platform for us to share our experiences.
Mm,
And two, I would say that they should know what they're getting themselves into. Like, I think it's important to know that academia may or may not work out. Similar, just like anything else, I could go get this
really?
BSc data science degree, and then 2 years from now, everybody's moved on from data science, and I don't know, they're doing something else, you
Sure.
know. And I think that's just the way the world works. Like, you need to be
Mm,
able to you need to know where it is you're going. You need to be able to know whether you are willing to put yourself out there like that. So if academia is something that you want to do and want to
mm,
pursue, go ahead, pursue it. But also know that if it doesn't work out, what do you do? If it works out, yeah. And to be honest, I worked with quite a few people still even at UCT and UFS, many of whom were young people like myself that had
mm.
just gotten the job. You can be the lucky one. And some
Exactly.
of these people, and a lot of these people are great at their jobs. It's just that, again, there was just one job for all of us to fight for, and they happened to get it. I didn't get it. So,
Mm,
doing a PhD, I'd say go ahead and do the PhD, but also know the facts around it that there's a high level of people out there with PhDs from prestigious institutions, Harvard,
mhm.
UCT, Oxford, that just quite frankly can't make it anywhere. And oftentimes people might have to start over because it's such a saturated market. Yeah, but I mean, if you love research, wanna move around, apply for some postdocs, then go ahead and do it. But if it's not for you, then maybe it's not for you.
Yeah, perfect. I also echo that. I won't even add or subtract from that advice.
One thing that I've sort of learned as well is that, being a teacher doesn't mean that you have to remain in academia. That's not the only place that you can teach. And, I
Mm,
had this thought the one time I was like, okay, cool. Um, if I work in a team, let's say if I work in a team now, I mean, I'm going to start working in a team now in an insurance team. We work together in that team. I'm the student, but I'm an ambitious guy. And
yeah,
if I happen to become a team leader one day, I become the teacher in that team, right?
exactly.
And that's it, that
Replacing.
teaching is not limited to university, that you can teach even outside this, even this space here. This is you teaching me a thing or two about life,
Yeah.
about life. And that, yeah, teaching is not limited to the university. And if you're trying to get a PhD to become a teacher, maybe not.
Yeah, definitely. So teaching is not limited to the university. Got it right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So we've come to a segment on the program where I ask every interviewee to ask me a question or a few if they've got any. I don't know if you've got any questions for me today.
Um, my question for you is, let me think. Do you think a PhD is worth it?
I think. a PhD is worth it if it's something you got into because you wanted to. And particularly, not saying this for people, some people don't pursue topics they're interested in, but I think if you were also able to channel your research towards something you're passionate about, that's also
Yeah,
beneficial.
yeah,
And I also think that it's a good thing to pursue. Let's say you've got the funding. I think you and I both had funding,
yeah.
and those were opportune times. We would have otherwise have maybe gone back home, been unemployed for a bit and whatnot. So I think that a PhD is worth it. There's skills
Yeah,
you learn,
that's good.
particularly in research. And research
Yeah,
skills, trust me, they are very transferable. And also, I think within the humanities, you learn a lot of people skills, especially if you end up doing research on people or
yeah.
people's behaviors, ways of living, particular case studies. So I do think that it's worth it in terms of just I feel like a wholesome human being, you know.
Mhm.
Doing research during those 3 years exposed me to a lot. It also,
Yeah,
for example, for me within politics, it was helpful. I spent the year of my master's dedicated to looking at what people think about particular policies. So going in depth on that. And I feel
yeah,
like those are skills that I can take elsewhere. You mentioned
yeah,
people in the sciences, they're able to move to
yeah,
laboratories, and
yeah,
whatnot. Um, I know that some fields it might look like, okay, but if I don't end up teaching or producing papers in this field, how is it going to help? But I do
yeah.
think that for the person who did it, there is
Mhm.
something you learn. Another
Yeah.
lesson is resilience. I don't know
Come
if
on.
you agree with me, but
3 a.m.
it's
in the
so
library
much
alone.
so much you go through. And even though there is support from others, there's
Yeah.
a lot that humbles you as a human being. And I think the way our minds work, they are muscles. One day when something else hits you, that muscle memory helps you to be able to tackle the situations. And even
Mhm.
the thinking, sometimes you question your own writing in addition to questioning what other people wrote.
Yeah.
So I believe that it is worth it.
Mhm.
Sorry to anyone who has paid for their PhD, but I feel like
Yeah.
if I were to pay fees for it and then be
Yeah.
in this situation, I would be so mad. So
Yeah.
I think a funded PhD.
Yeah. A funded PhD
Yes. Yeah. But I
is
believe
good.
it's worth
Yeah.
it. Yes.
A funded PhD. Yeah. I mean, I believe it's worth it too. Like I said, that I learned quite a lot during my PhD.
Mm.
Oh yeah, and I met my wife while I was doing my PhD. So I think
Was it in the
and I
computer
got to
lab? Sorry for me going there.
no, I think it was just I was on
On
campus.
campus.
I was on campus somewhere, and I
Yeah.
met I was with another friend who happened to be her friend, and that was it.
You see, so
So
some people meet their people in undergrad and then others postgrad or master's, PhD. So
yeah.
something amazing also came out of that, a lifetime partner. Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like I said, I think I agree that PhD, you do get a lot of skills.
Mm,
The resilience one, I think that is definitely one of them. And I think being able to pivot, because I'm sure you can speak to this, that you're writing a chapter, you think it's going to be great, and your supervisor's like,
so,
I don't know. Then you have to rewrite, rethink the idea.
mm,
You have to redo. So I think those are some of the skills that I would say I learned. People skills quite good as well
mm,
because I had to sit with like 70 people and ask them the same question over and over again.
wow.
Um, yeah, so it was fun. I enjoyed my PhD years. Definitely. I think the only challenge for me sort of came after that. And definitely yeah, I think for me, I was just like maybe doing research and writing papers is not something that I'm cut out to do. And there are people who do that very well. I worked with a guy at UFS. This guy was brilliant. Like when it came to
Mm,
research and writing papers, I think he's like one of the most brilliant guys
mm,
I came across when it came to doing that. But I just didn't have that drive to write papers and do research in the
Mm.
same way that he did. So I would say then that maybe you could interview him as well.
Oh yeah, please do, name drop and I'll reach out to them.
I'll
Definitely.
do so. I'll do so. I'll
Great.
do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so lastly for mine, I also think that this is a loss for our funders and universities because the same system has not been able to retain us. But I guess good for the world because we'll still go out there and be amazing human beings.
Yeah. Try do something else. So, last question on politics.
Oh, hectic. All right.
Coalition government in South Africa.
Mm.
Thoughts?
I think coalitions are needed, particularly because, the will of the people has been expressed through the vote count. I think where
Yeah.
South Africa is at is a very tricky space. Personally, because I believe that people with the same politics should go together. When I see EFF, I see people that came out of the ANC Youth League. When I see MK, I see aggrieved ANC people. So I'm just like, just go back, form this coalition government, sort
Yeah.
out whatever you had, make this your opportunity to show that you can be great again and
Yeah.
fulfill the promises that were aligned to the liberation movement.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that Okay, I'm a political analyst. Let me just say this. I do think that, having ANCDA would have been amazing theoretically on paper. You've got someone with 40%, another one with about 21%. That's ideal for decision making in parliament. You need at least like 60% of people
Yeah.
voting for it. But
Mhm.
ideologically, that won't work. And also, I do think that 30 years after 1994 is too soon to have such a marriage of political parties because our memories of the past are so fresh. And I do
Yeah.
think that the DA hasn't done so much to prove that they are really for the South Africa that people have been dreaming about, because I think the dream is still like not yet achieved. So I'm really pro ANC getting together with the EFF and maybe MK as well. They need the MK. Yeah. I think those are the two coalition options I've been thinking about. If there's any small
Yeah.
parties that want to come along and they have representatives who can be ministers with
Yeah.
portfolios that resonate with their skills, I'm also for that because I think we need to give them credit for coming into this election with their own parties or as independents and actually getting the votes. So I think the government should also just have a very diverse cabinet, multi-party cabinet, since it's going to be a
Mm.
multi-party coalition. You got
It's
me
gonna
right
be
there, hey? Yo.
interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think I've been looking at it and just wondering, man, what is the next step? And hopefully,
Mm.
I remember my country is still one of those where the ANC of the day still remains ruling, and there
Wow.
have been some shots every now and again to try and topple the system, and I think we came very close last time around.
Mm.
But yeah, they'll keep trying. They'll keep trying. Keep trying. Swapo of the day.
Oh wow, nice. I come from Zimbabwe, so it's always just get that 50 plus one and we are safe. Those are the results.
Yeah.
So also coming from that position, but I think 40% was a drop that I think most of us didn't anticipate in as much as we thought the ANC would fall below a 50%.
Yeah, I remember looking at polls and someone was talking about 49%, 40, I think as
That
low
was
as 45
optimistic.
was the one that
Yeah.
was the least I saw. But 40%, let's wait and see what happens for the next 5 years.
Yeah. 2029. Interesting.
Congratulations, Musi, by the way. That was
Ah, build one South
flew,
Africa. Yeah, they've
flew
got
under the radar. But let's see what happens next.
Yes, definitely. All right.
Yeah.
So our parting note is always you giving us, last few words. They don't have to be academic to all of our viewers and listeners out there.
Last few words. Geez, I feel like I've said a lot already. But
Mm,
I'd say in terms of last few words, I would say that it's important, it's better to at least being in my 30s now, I've realized that it's better to go to work and be happy and passionate about the work that you do than to come home stressed because I would say we grew up in those systems where our parents would come from work angry, stressed, and we'd see our
Yes.
friends also, and collective anger when 5 o'clock hits, we're just like, yo, they're coming back. But
Mm,
what you do outside in terms of your work, that shouldn't really define you, but it should make you happy. It shouldn't really define you, but it should make you happy.
great. So what do you
Yeah.
do outside work?
What do I do? Music.
Oh,
Play
no.
music. I used to hike when I was in Cape Town, but not as much anymore.
Mm,
Probably going to start running again soon. Just
please,
been procrastinating that,
please.
but
There's
probably
few
start
of
running
us.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chasing endorphins.
Yes, they work for me. I don't know about everyone
Yeah,
else, but runner's high is a thing for me. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. I remember once I clocked a 10K. I was like, yeah. Yeah, I did. I used to do 10Ks at some point, and I was like, yeah, once I hit my 10, I'm
Wow.
good. So
Nice.
I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much for those last words. And I hope people find, their activity is something that just refreshes their mind and so that we don't live lives that are just full of work stress and focusing just on that. And I
Yeah,
do echo the point on work. Work is important. The
yeah.
income is important.
Income is
And
important.
and what the income looks like, pension,
Yeah,
medical aid, and
yeah,
all of that and all of that. Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing. All right.
yeah.
So unfortunately, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you
We
so
have.
much once again, Gustav, without the
Thank you.
PhD, for joining us.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
on Research Notes. So to everyone back at home, I'm Dr. Primrose ZJ Bima, and I'm on a mission to demystify the world of research by interviewing people from different disciplines. Thank you for watching, and also thank you for listening. It's goodbye for now.